you can teach a man to fish, but if the man doesn't have access to like the resources, then it doesn't really matter if they know how to fish. And I feel like that's kind of part of the work that we're learning how to do, is like, how do we give people the, not only the like knowledge on how to change or enhance their communities, but also like the resources.
The voice you just heard was one of my students from this past semester. Did she just say students? I sure did. This past year, I started teaching at Temple University, so while I'll always be MG the venue specialist, I'm really enjoying my role as Professor MG. As a project for my leadership and organizations class, the students paired up to record a short podcast about what they've enjoyed and learned in class so far, incorporating the role of emotional intelligence in their lives. With the students' permission to use their project for this season, I've broken each recording into bite-sized clips. This week, I'm joined by James Varughese, a part of the customer experience team serving small businesses that use Intuit QuickBooks Payment products. We'll listen to the clips and carry on the conversation started by Sierra and Celia. Intuit is a global technology platform that helps customers and communities overcome their most important financial challenges. Serving approximately 100 million customers worldwide with TurboTax, QuickBooks, Mint, Credit Karma, and MailChimp, Intuit believes that everyone should have the opportunity to prosper. For the latest information about Intuit products and services, please visit intuit.com or learn more on social networks such as LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. The views expressed in this episode are those alone of James Varughese, myself, MG the venue specialist, aka Professor MG, and our student guests, Sierra and Celia. If you're looking to gain insight into self-awareness as a leader and within community development, you're in the right place. Thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the following episode, Mindful Ways to Make an Impact 303 with James Varughese. Don't be late to class. Class is in session. I'm Professor MG, and today I am joined by my friend James, who you might recognize as he was a guest on season 2 of Beyond the Venue podcast. I really wanted to bring James back on the show for season 3 because empathy was in the title of his podcast episode. I think was it leading with empathy? Is that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And so that really resonated with a lot of my students. And so I just thought it was such an appropriate connection to bring you back on the show. So James, for our listeners that hadn't had a chance to check you out on season 2, can you let our listeners know a little bit about yourself?
For sure. And MG, thank you so much for bringing me back. It's an honor to be asked and be part of your podcast. So just to give a quick background on myself, my name is James Varughese. I'm currently residing in California, in Northern California in the Bay Area. I'm originally from the East Coast. I'm actually here right now, just visiting family, enjoying the time with the parents and the friends and the family. It's fantastic to be able to do this, as my job kind of allows me to travel a little bit for work. And I currently am a customer experience professional at Intuit. I serve small business owners that use our QuickBooks products to run their small businesses. And throughout my entire professional career, I've had different experiences that kind of led me to working in a career in CX. And a big part of CX is empathy, understanding what it's like to be in our customers' shoes, not just their experience with our products, but what's going on in their life, in their business, and so on, to help them make the most of their experience with us.
Love it. And we just had it was such a great experience to be able to, reconnect and have this conversation a couple of years ago. So listeners, definitely check out the episode in season 2. We dive into it more because at the time, James and I were having quarterly meetings where I was sharing updates about what it was like to be a small business owner. And, unfortunately I had to move away from my subscription with QuickBooks, as more money is coming in from my teaching career as opposed to my business. So just had to make some financial moves. However, super excited to be talking to you today and reconnecting. So we're just going to jump right into our first clip. The students that we are paired with today are Sierra and Celia. Let's hear what they have to say.
Hi, everybody. My name is Celia. I am a senior here at Temple, majoring in community development and minoring in nutrition. Sierra, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, I'm Sierra. As Celia just said, I'm also a senior at the community development course. And we are actually classmates. So this ended up really working out for this podcast. So Celia, why did you choose this major in your minor?
That is a really great question. So backstory, I originally really didn't want to go to Temple, but my mother was like, you need to apply here. And I didn't know what major I wanted to be. I kind of was looking at communications. I was going to be undeclared. And then I came across the community development major, and it just kind of very perfectly aligned with all of my interests. Going off of that, I thought I was going to be a planner. That was my original trajectory. But during freshman year, kind of realized that that was not going to work out, that not where I was meant to be. And I took a sustainable food systems planning class, and that kind of ignited a love that I already have for food and nutrition and the environment. And I decided to pick up the nutrition minor. And so it's been interesting. At first, I didn't really see how the two would intersect, but they have turned out to be really cool and a really great combination. A bit about why you chose or how you came to be in the community development major.
Of course. So I was originally an architecture major, and mid-sophomore year, I realized that it was not my lifelong career. And I personally was passionate about architecture, but more as a hobby. But I didn't want to drastically change my major to something else like cardiology or anything out there like that. So I started searching for similar jobs around the area, and turns out urban planning and city development was something that really related to me and ended up becoming something I could realistically do for a long time that would also benefit my community.
I always love hearing about people's paths. And to me, like this clip, I'm fascinated that they had a journey within their undergraduate program that I feel like I would not go on to have until years later. That
Right.
you and I both went to Drexel. I assume you did the 5-year 3 co-op program through Drexel.
I did, yes, and I changed my major 3 times.
Did you really? So I considered it because, as a marketing undergrad, I had these corporate co-ops that I hated being in a cubicle. I hated corporate America. There are just so many things that I hated, but I loved working in the city. And so co-op taught me what I did not want to do. And so I didn't know what to switch my major to because I feel like there weren't interesting. I just didn't know myself the way that students, in this generation that I'm now teaching, they're so much more self-aware. They have so many different passions and interests that I feel like I just was not there at all when I was their age. And it wasn't until I was looking for a graduate school program that, that was the kind of proverbial switching my major, that finding that tourism and hospitality management program, I'm like, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life. So, what about you? What is I know you talk a lot about your path and your career journey in season 2, but again, for our brand new listeners, what is kind of your story been like?
Yeah, I think just starting it from when I was in high school and thinking about what my college career would be like, I think a lot of it sounded like Celia as well. As like, hey, you got to go to this certain kind of school and do this certain kind of thing, and you kind of find your way there. And I was fortunate enough to have, earned a scholarship and had the means to go to a school like Drexel. And part of that though was, am I doing this because I think it's what's right and I'm going to figure it as I go? And that's where I started those co-ops, meeting people that had the same kind of major and track than I did. And I was like, yeah, I don't see myself doing that. So
Agreed.
originally, my first major was in management information systems. And I saw that as, okay, it's mixing, computers and technology and business. Those are two things that I'm interested in. And then when I started working with some folks that had that background at a very small IT consulting firm in Conshohocken, or Plymouth Meeting, sorry. I realized I was like, this isn't really for me. Like, it's not really, satisfying both my professional objectives and also I didn't really have my heart in it, right?
Right.
And kind of going back to college, the next couple of years, it's like, all right, let's change it up. Take the MIS out of it, go into marketing, which was more interesting to me, and then later on adding finance to that as well. So I could speak more to that, but I think the important thing here is that like you said, I learned what I didn't want to do early,
Yes. And
that
I
benefited
will
me
always
so
be
much in the
very,
future.
very, very, very grateful for that. And it was, for
Yeah.
me, it was after finishing my third co-op, which I thought I wanted to go to law school. So my third co-op was I was a marketing assistant at a law firm in Center City. And I was like, absolutely not. This is off the table. I want no part of this. And again, not realizing, how many different paths you could take with a law degree. So, one of my girlfriends, she, graduated from Temple Law 10, 15 years ago and is now like a higher up in HR. So it's, I think for me, especially was like studying abroad as well, that I'm like, okay, now I'm really lost because this was a phenomenal experience. What, what, I just remember just being so lost senior year. And what I told my students as well, I'm like, okay, graduating seniors or not, when people are asking you constantly, what are you doing after graduation? I know that that's driving you crazy. So come up with some sort of asinine answer because this is a skill you're going to need for the rest of your life. Oh, you have a partner. When are you getting married? Oh, you're married. When are you having kids? know, people are going to constantly come at you with these kinds of questions that if you come up with like a silly answer, hopefully that'll be like, all right, I get it. You're still figuring it out. Cause I loved having guest speakers that would say like, I majored in finance and now you know, I did 20 different things and now I'm like the CEO of, a tech startup because that's where like A went to B, went to C. And so that inspired me and reminded me that just because I'm graduating with a marketing degree doesn't mean that I'm doing marketing for the rest of my life. And so I love bringing in guest speakers with those kinds of paths as well to just keep reminding these students that whatever it is that your degree is going to be in, it doesn't mean you're going to be doing that like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And I think you and I are kind of prime
Totally.
examples of that as well.
Yeah, and I think just pairing it back to purpose. What am I doing here?
The why.
What is my it goes back to the why, right? Like, why am I doing this? And something that gives me a lot of hope, especially speaking with college students. I don't speak to so many of them, but I have a second cousin who just finished her first year at UC Riverside, and we talked a little bit about her journey and her friends and what's going on there. But I got this feeling of, and even Sierra said it, it's like the benefit more than just me. Like, what am I going to do that's going to help others? And like, that's that thing that I feel. Maybe it's just my age, or maybe I'm looking for it. I don't know, but I hear it more from younger generations now.
Yeah, 18 to 23-year-olds MG was not that concerned with other people.
Same here.
Yeah. These kids are incredible, and I'm just constantly reflecting on how different they are compared to how we were. when we were their age, and it just gives me hope. So, well, speaking of, let's move on to the next clip where they are going to talk about self-awareness and visionary leadership.
Since we are classmates, we decided to connect those leadership skills that we've been learning about with how it relates to the CDev major.
Yeah, we thought this could be a really interesting kind of connection, since leadership is so integral, like being a good leader, being self-aware, and having a lot of those skills that we've talked about throughout the class so far, can really relate back to our major. Do you think that we should talk a little bit about what community development is? And just to, because I think we know what it is, but we don't know if the audience knows what it is.
Right. My interpretation, it's just about how we as leaders can help communities help themselves, almost like we use their assets with the community in order to gain more for the residents, so that way their community thrives.
A quote that I remember from a video that I watched in one of the classes for our major, that was talking about like the if you teach a man to fish kind of quote. And it was like, you can teach a man to fish, but if the man doesn't have access to like the resources, then it doesn't really matter if they know how to fish. And I feel like that's kind of part of the work that we're learning how to do, is like, how do we give people not only the like knowledge on how to change or enhance their communities, but also like the resources. So like from a very on the ground perspective, and also like a more policy perspective. I think we've like had a lot of both of those types of courses.
Of course, yeah, definitely. And I think like it's more almost human. It's not like us just coming in and like taking over, but it's more like, I want to work with you in order to help you fix area A, or I'm part of this community, and as a resident in this community, as your neighbor, we should be doing XYZ in order to make sure that everyone's okay. So
Yeah,
it's definitely good in that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that also speaks to like what we've talked about in this class, with kind of the being a manager versus a leader. And thinking about, if you're a manager, you're kind of going to go in and like put your vision onto somebody else, and that's kind of what we want to avoid in our work, especially, I think, because a lot of times the people, like the community development professionals going in, might not always be completely integrated into the neighborhood at first.
Right. It needs to be like almost visionary, where the visionary leadership skill was mentioned, where like it needs to be understood and felt through all levels. That kind of leadership is important in order to help bridge that gap and make sure that everybody knows that we're all working as one team in order to define and focus on this one vision, which could be anything, because we've learned all sorts of skills, like you said, food sustainability, architecturally sustainability. Like there are all sorts of perspectives when it comes to these communities. So it's good to understand, like, as a leader, what sort of vision you want. Like you said, emotionally, you have to be really intelligent and like understand things from not only yourself, but like what the community wants. I think that quote that we learned in class, where it says a lack of self-awareness can also thwart your ability to think rationally, and apply technical capabilities is so imperative for our major, because like obviously you, like you said, like you can have the knowledge, but if you don't know like who you are and what your goals are, and you know like what is important to you, you can't help anybody else.
I think what they just said there speaks so true to what you do in your work and trying to help small business owners. Like you're going directly to the source and asking them, you know, in kind of a roundabout way of trying to get information from them so you can help them as small business owners.
Yeah, totally. And I think, part of that is interviews like we used to do.
Hmm.
Other parts can be collecting feedback from surveys or having structured interviews. In a past life, I was in competitive intelligence with another company, and we'd be tracking traffic and keywords and yada yada. But end of the day, me in my role, I'm not a small business owner right now. Like the closest I can get is speaking to small business owners, and I can do experience reviews till I'm blue in the face, but I won't really know what it feels like to be waiting for a payment to come in, or to have those initial meetings with a new customer or prospect and figure out, well, how am I going to forecast this into my my work and so on. So that's a really big part of that. How do I understand what you're going through? And it's a lot of work. It can be exhausting too, but at the same time, as much time and energy as it takes, it also gives you a lot of energy because you're not just learning more about that customer, but you're finding ways to help them. And for me personally, I actually take a lot of pride in the fact that when I do what I do well, there's a 1 + 1 = 3 effect, right? You're going to see that kind of come through, and not just that, that product that I feature, but that customer. I've essentially changed their perception, their usage, whatever it may be at the time. But that's what gives me that motivation to keep going.
Love it. That's awesome. All right. So our next clip is regarding effective leadership within community development efforts.
So I think of your food sustainability and like your nutrition, like so now you can come in with this knowledge and you're able to communicate, like, hey, these foods are good, these foods are bad. Do you want to learn how to maybe start an urban farm, or, like, I think that's so cool that you know that. Do you want to go more in depth about like how you think food sustainability and like nutrition will help in communities?
Yeah, I think there were a few things that you said that made me think of just like the importance of, I think, this class in teaching us how to be like effective leaders. And also, I can definitely touch on that point as well. I think in terms of like my personal, like where I hope to see my career go, or like how, I don't know, is I think like as like the Philadelphia area, like especially around North Philly, is like has been considered a food desert, and there's not a lot of like resources, but like Cousin Supermarket and Fresh Grocer and things like that have kind of been helping to change that narrative. And I think part of what I'm really passionate about is not only like doing that, but also like uplifting people to help the environment too. So like trying to figure out how to integrate more of that, like not necessarily like good and bad foods, but like this is how you can add things into your diet, and like trying to uplift communities that kind of struggle with both like food insecurity and health related issues to like diet um and access and things like that. And like again, as we were talking about earlier, kind of working with communities and not going in and being like, well, this is what I think you should do, because then people won't do things if you do that. And it's like giving information and also trying to make it, yeah, just accessible.
Like I like how you said that instead of just telling people, oh, this food is good and this food is bad, you're like, instead of doing all that, why don't you add this or why don't you add that? That's such a good idea. Like, so that way you're not rewriting the system or just bossing people around, because I feel like a lot of the times we're always told, like, don't eat fast food,
Mm-hmm.
eat vegetables. And like, it's like, okay, well, I get that, but like, no.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but instead you're like, oh, you like, I don't know, spicy sriracha chicken. Why don't you add like pickles, lettuce, tomato, and another vegetable that goes really good on top of it? Like
Yeah.
that makes sense. That seems way more helpful than oftentimes what we hear today.
I love the way that Sierra says that. I just crack up the way. Why don't you add pickles and lettuce and tomato? But I think they've raised some really, really interesting points. And interestingly enough, there is a brand new low cost grocery store that is going to be going into North Philly. So very big deal, because they do talk about North Philly being a food desert, that it's actually a gentleman who is from the Philadelphia area that was working for this low cost grocery chain, and saw that they were opening one in Philadelphia, and he's like, well, I'm just going to buy it. I'm going to run it. And so it's awesome to see some progress in that direction. But one of the things that kind of struck me, this is always like an ongoing conversation of, having to acknowledge our privilege in certain ways. So I'm not sure what laws are implemented in the Bay Area. However, in Philadelphia, we have the Philadelphia soda tax, and so all sugary drinks are taxed. Which that money, I believe, goes towards preschool and pre-K. And then we also recently had a plastic bag ban. So, both of these, one, healthier lifestyle, two, better for the environment, but it's detrimental to those lower income families. And so,
Right.
How, where's the trade-off? And so are there any programs like that are implemented in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I mean, when it comes to plastic bags, as far as the sugar tax, I don't believe that we had that, but I could be wrong. But something that I'm hearing here is, what's the downstream impact of doing something? Does it affect all people equally? Does it affect some people more than others? And how do you evaluate that over time?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I see is that a leader can come in and they'll institute things that maybe look good on paper, but once they actually get put into practice, you start seeing certain things kind of come out that were unexpected. This kind of goes back to Sierra and Celia talking about vision and what that
Mm-hmm.
looks like to bring everyone on that journey with you to say, here's where we're headed, here's what's going to take to get there. And it's so important for those leaders to kind of tell tell those stories, and this is what this future looks like together. To get those things done, platinum rule it, right? Like, I'm not treating you as I think that I would want to be treated. I'm treating you as you would want to be treated. That also goes so far in, hey, you should do this and you shouldn't do that. It's like, well, do you think I have a choice right now?
Right.
Right? Can I make a decision whether what to eat based on food availability or so on? So yeah, I think the awareness for that, I'm just floored by how not just articulate, but again, self-aware the students have been in these recordings.
It's they've blown me away. And Sierra, she's the best, because she the student that sits up in the front of the class and always has an answer, always has a question, like that was her. And it was great because you need people to encourage the other students to speak up and kind of create that brave space that students aren't scared of saying the wrong thing. And so the last month of classes, I brought in guest speakers each week, and I always knew, it's like, okay, what question has she got today? So I'm very excited to see how her career progresses over the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. All
Yeah,
right.
and to that point,
Mhm.
they're really there for the experience, right? So it's like, I'm going to make the most of this time. I'm going to participate. We'll get ideas out there. And it's so important to do that instead of just, hey, I'm going to be passive and just let things kind of go as they will.
And I try and set up the classroom environment so that it's engaging, and always doing some sort of activity in every single class, that they can learn from and take away from. So, all right, we're going to jump into our next clip. Situational leadership for navigating community development.
You said earlier, like having urban farms or things like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's all like very interconnected, and then you also have like the social aspect of it. So
yeah, it's a good mix. It's a good balance, and I feel like if anything, these skills that we learned at Temple not only teach us how to like use our knowledge, but also understanding different people's backgrounds and feelings and making it more important for emotional intelligence, like really building us up for that sort of leadership skill. I agree.
yeah.
Yeah, like for me, with my architectural background and like, you know, I really want to focus on like sustainability and like making sure like people who are low income or like people with old homes, like row homes are very old in Philadelphia. And it's very difficult to get something new in there, especially a new energy resource. But it like if that were if there are programs that are able to help with that effort in creating these green energy resources like solar energy, like they're building affordable PVC energy, solar energy grids for row homes, especially in Philly, so that way it can not only lower the cost of your energy bill, but also using electricity other than coal, to stop greenhouse gases is amazing to me, and I want everyone to know about it. Like it's like I want to get the word out, bridge this gap where they can find these resources. Like here, call this person, or here, let's build it together and stuff like that. Like I think that's important, and everybody should know about it. So that's why. That's my little tidbit of like, using intelligence to help those around us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That also like makes me think of, I guess, stigma, I think, around like these kind of like low income areas in Philadelphia, and like what housing has to look like for them, and what like these neighborhoods have to look like, or what the like that whole kind of narrative that I think sometimes gets more attention than it really deserves. And like the Paseo Verde building that we were in, where that's is it just low income, or is that also mixed use?
I want to say that's low income primary.
Yeah, and like that's a very LEED certified. It's incredible, like the just environmental sustainability element that the building has. And I think that speaks a lot to what you were just talking about. Like we have to kind of be innovative, and but also be aware of ourselves when kind of going in and being like, we want to do these cool things to like, help the environment and help you and this and that, and being like, okay, wait, do you actually want this though?
Yeah.
Then what can we do to like bring in these new things and also help you kind of keep your community how you want to see your community?
Oh yeah. That's why I think the topic's situational leadership is so important. Like when we were talking about that skill in class and how it relates like to everything that we do, especially for community development. Like we have to come from different angles. Like each situation is different and each community is different. And as a result, you have to kind of like navigate and adapt to those situations and the needs of the community. Because maybe when we graduate and like, you know, we're starting our careers, maybe they won't need a sustainability resource. Maybe that's not the first thing on their list. Maybe that's the third thing, and
Hmm.
and they want to knock the other two out first. Like, you're gonna have to be patient and work together with the community in order to, break down the needs and or the wants of the community before you even put your own ideas out there.
Absolutely love this concept, and it really hit me hard because we just talked about this, about how important it is to understand the effects of like decisions and changes being made on like who it's ultimately going to be affecting the most. And so this resonates with me because I feel like I've had this exact kind of issue in the workplace in several different capacities of whether it's a new leader coming in or changes being implemented without an explanation of like a why. Here's exactly why we're doing this. I'm going to spell this all out for you, as opposed to like a because I said so. And not offering up that transparency is just really frustrating, and I think makes for a very toxic workplace environment. Has this happened to you, throughout your 20-year career history, of whether it was, you know, new leadership or new policies being implemented, but like no backstory and no explanation as to why?
Oh, totally. And I think a lot of it is, there's definitely been, like we said earlier, I learned what I didn't want to do through my co-op experience. Throughout the years, I've been so fortunate to work with excellent leaders and excellent managers and coworkers, and along the way, just by chance of statistics, I didn't have, or I had not so great leaders, not so great managers, and so on. But it's trust. It comes back to, hey, I'm asking you to go out of your range here, but I trust that you'll not just be okay with the decision, but that you'll understand. And when the time comes, we can go through what that means for you, the company, your team, whatever. So I think a big part of that is, hey, I trust my leader. At the time, they use the tools at their discretion or at their disposal to make a decision and then move forward. But again, this goes back to understanding, at a certain point in time, you may not have the flexibility to do all the things that you want to do. I think the best leaders that I've ever worked for and worked with are the ones that make those deposits in that bank of trust, basically, over time. And I wouldn't
I like
necessarily
that.
say it's a withdrawal when they kind of take back on that and say, oh yeah, I got to do something that maybe won't be great. But it helps when you kind of put yourself in their shoes to be like, if I think you're getting squeezed too. So like that was a big change for me as well as I matured throughout my career. So what is it like to be on that side of it? And I think, just from the community component of it, I've had my own experiences with that, being an HOA president for a couple of years, doing community work in my immediate place in California. Really, what's the benefit for them? Like, what do
Hmm.
I get out of this? And being very clear and concise on, hey, here's what it's going to be like in the short term, the long term, balancing that out, the risks associated with it, and so on. Right. So I had the luxury of doing that, but again, you don't always have that luxury.
You had a massive project that you were working on with your HOA. You got what was the project that you were able to get completed?
Yeah, actually, it was outside of the HU. It was after my tenure as president, but we live on a street that has a double yellow, and in the time that I've moved into the townhome that we're in, more houses sprung up. So in the past, there wasn't a lot of foot traffic, and there wasn't a lot of need for traffic calming measures. In short, speed bumps, right? So having worked with the county, with different vendor or different construction companies, and with the community, we were able to get speed bumps installed. And this wasn't like a we'll just willy-nilly put this anywhere. It's like, no, there were schematics, there were considerations made, multiple teams were, brought into the project. And once it got moving, it was done. But before all that happened, I had to get 2/3 of our community to sign a petition for it. And this was during COVID. So like I
Right.
had to make sure that it was okay to submit digital, signatures. Yeah, towards the end, we couldn't get enough digital ones, so we had to walk around in masks and gloves and clean pens to like get people to hand sign signatures. And it was hard. Like, I actually had people decline and say, I lived in somewhere else and we tried to do this and we failed and I don't want to fail again. And I was like, I can't force you
All
to
you have
sign
to
this,
do is
but
just sign a piece of
I
paper.
and it I had to look at that as like, this is not personal, right?
Right.
Like they have a perspective. I'm not going to try and change their mind, but I'm going to focus on what I can do and what I can control. And we were able to do it. Like again, it wasn't just me. Like a two-third, like 66 other households were able to say, like, all right, let's do this, and it was around that many. Um, so it was a good experience. But again, it did actually tell me a little bit about myself. Like as a leader in that situation, I had to flex. I had to change my styles, and when I had
That's
to move fast,
situational
make decisions
leadership,
of my own, that
James.
I did. Exactly, and I appreciate the reading that you shared and how your students have been referring to that, very very accurately. So it's awesome to hear
And yeah, I think situational leadership was definitely one of the favorite styles amongst my students, just because it just makes sense to either possess those skills to be able to be flexible and adapt to the situation at hand, or to be able to conform your style based on whether it's the situation or the person that you're leading, or that's as these young kind of 20 something kids, like that's the preferred style of how they would prefer to be led, like someone who it's just adaptability and flexibility, and not obviously authoritative was the least favorite of the
you. Yeah, I
students.
mean, I think especially when I mean, maybe I just saw this when I was coming out of college, but more of that assertive or coercive style where it's like what I do goes and you're just going to go along with it. But I think one of the things that I value in a leader is that self-awareness of how far they can or can't go, or like, hey, I know I'm not an expert in this. I'm going to ask you because I know you're an expert. That goes back to like this, you might have seen some other folks, some other companies, some other people have this hubris of, well, I'm a manager, so I should know everything. It's like, do you really? Like,
Mm-mm. Always
so
be
it's
learning.
really having that. Yeah, I mean, like you need to have that self awareness, that introspection of, no, I need help, or I don't know, and take it from there.
And that's it was crazy because I had never researched or really heard the term emotional intelligence until teaching this last semester. And I guess I obviously very well of self-awareness and managing your emotions, but I didn't know that there was a name given to it. And so to learn about this concept of emotional intelligence, and then to reflect back on the awful managerial styles that I have experienced back in the day, it's like, oh, if boss, will not name names here, would have just sat through maybe a quick course on emotional intelligence, how different would that situation have been? So, I- you know, I wish that emotional intelligence was taught, in preschool and in kindergarten, and then it is taught throughout your entire academic journey, because of how different this world would be if everyone could regulate their emotions and everyone was self-aware. I wish for that future one day.
That ability for someone to take themselves out of an equation and look at things for what they are, and then say, you know, should I be in this situation? Should I be in this equation? What do I contribute to it? Is whatever we're doing making things better or worse, or short term, long term? I would even go as far as saying this helps in personal relationships as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I believe that a big reason of why I'm still friends with people that I've known for 30 years is because we have that shared, not just a shared bond of time, but it's we care for each other,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be shown in different ways. You and I have known each other for over 20 years.
Whew.
Like, I think about, I gave dramatic pause there. Like, why are we still hanging out? It's like, well, we both care for each other. We both talk to each other. We ask each other questions. Like, but it's that, we see ourselves like in the moments of what we're doing here today, but also that opens up for like, well, how can we help each other in the future? And I think that's a big part of how a lot of my relationships are now.
Well, happy to still be friends with you after all this time. All right, we are going to jump into our final clip for the episode.
The pandemic has, I think, changed the structure of like community organizing also, and just like you were saying, like you really have to know how to adapt and come in with ideas that you have, but also be willing to be flexible on the spot and change to help the community, or change to a situation that could be uncomfortable because somebody is bringing up things that you don't want to be brought up.
But everybody has a different idea of how to do something,
Mhm.
especially in a neighborhood like in a city like Philly, where it's been around for a really long time and they've been doing it this one way for like 100 years. So forget thinking about doing it differently. Then you have to have a different approach. Like, okay, well, you'll see me next week, and that will come from a different approach. Like maybe it will no longer be delegating, but like trying to sell you the idea instead.
Yeah.
Or like, I don't know. Like there are all sorts of different ways. That's why I think like the 4 points where it's like telling, selling, participating, or delegating, it
Mhm.
really could be any of those based on the people that you are surrounded by, the community that you're working with, and
Yeah.
the politicians.
Yeah. Politicians are always a big contributor to, I think, which of those points you're going to be choosing
Oh yeah.
to to focus on.
That's why I'm so glad the chapter broke us down about like different maturity levels and whatnot, and how to go about it based on what you analyze. There have been times where like were you gonna say something? I'm sorry.
No. You're good. You're good.
Like there have been times where like when I was interning for the city planning commission in Philadelphia, where we would sit like for walk audits or community meetings, and they would just like they wanted answers to things that the office did not have. Like maybe this issue doesn't involve the planning office, it involved the streets department, but they didn't know that. And there's no way of saying, well, they couldn't have known that. There are some places where they genuinely don't know, or like they're not familiar with, or maybe a leadership change in the office caused this lack of connection anymore. But like, how do you go about that without sounding condescending? Like, is it like, that like their maturity level is like low competence but high commitment? So like that means that you have to be more selling and stuff like that. And so it's all it's good information is what I'm saying, based on
Yeah.
I think what we've been learning so far.
Breaking it down with the maturity levels was really interesting to me. I think I touched on it a bit in my like discussion post too, because you really, it like kind of helps guide you when it comes to which one to use, because like everyone has different levels of understanding or abilities. I know one of the quotes that had stood out to me was like, when leaders know themselves and have a clear sense of who they are and what they stand for, they have a strong anchor for their decisions and actions. I think that is kind of like cumulative of like what this class has been, just like giving us the tools to, I think, know ourselves better and figure out how we can go out into the world and be those like compassionate and understanding leaders that we need in our world.
Agreed. I think this class has been an eye opener on like different skills that I thought I had that maybe I didn't. Now that I realize it, I don't actually have, and like being more self aware and starting to build up that concept, especially just before we're about to leave too. Like as seniors, this is our final semester. Like we've got one foot out the door, and Tupple's like, by the way, one more thing before you go. And it's like the most important thing.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, it's good knowledge. I do enjoy the class, and I will probably apply this pretty often in the future.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
I mean, obviously, I have, the humble brag here with, I'm teaching these students skills they're going to be using for the rest of their lives. I think I did an okay job this past semester. Just when it comes to leadership, they're so right. Like you have to know yourself to be an effective leader, and pretty much all of their assignments are a form of a reflection paper of, whether it's like do an assessment and reflect on this, or every single activity is getting them to understand like a different piece of themselves. And so, one of the last questions I have for you, James, clearly we are way more evolved now than we were 20 years ago when we first met. Did you have, mentors throughout your career that kind of helped you with like self-awareness and helping you with your own emotional intelligence? Or do you feel like there was like a specific pivotal moment, or has it just kind of been a long ongoing journey? Because if you would have asked me 20 years ago, would you be talking to James Varughese about, goal spreadsheets and setting intentions? And I would have laughed in your face. So just curious if was it a process? Was it a mentor? Was it a class? What kind of helped you in that journey?
I'm actually going to back it up, and you use the word humble brag before. I'm going to amp up your humble brag, because what you just did is created future leaders.
Yay!
Right? And other people
That's what I'm doing.
their behavior, and they're like, "Oh, that's what a good leader looks like." How awesome is that, right?
It's pretty.
I think about that
that's
a
why.
lot whenever.
That's why I want to keep doing this.
Yeah, right. And it's that network effect, right? You might hear like, one person hears about it, three other people hear about it, those three talk to two people about it, and then you have this kind of web of individuals that are now affected by that. And a lot of it goes back to identifying what's toxic and what's not, what works for me, what doesn't, what my values are. I'll bring it back to my home life, and having wonderful parents and a family and support there was great. But then when I had to kind of go make it on my own, critical point for me was moving to California back in 2011. And there was a slew of things prior to that, but I think it was really understanding, who do I want to surround myself with? People that are smart, people that are compassionate, people that care about not just the immediate benefit or deliverable, but it's the, what is this going to look like in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and so on. So, I think it's having worked at small companies and large companies, the world is truly as small as you make it. And you want to surround yourself with those folks that not just, give off that good aura. I don't want to get too granola, too California into it, but it really is those individuals that they are not in it just for themselves, but they know the value of relationships, and they know that they don't know everything. So when everything's going great, then it seems pretty easy. But when things aren't going so well, I think that's when you start seeing true leaders come out. And your students referred to how this has changed with COVID. We've all been thrown into this, really, really tough situation where we've had to figure out, well, what do I care about? How do I lead? How do I get things done? And so on, not just at work, but at home and everywhere else in between. So the skills that your students are talking to, again, have a lot of applications all over the place. You did ask a question in regards to like, how was this journey for me? And again, so fortunate to have met certain people in my career, certain bosses that taught me lessons as far as here's and critical feedback is not meant to be personally damaging. It's meant to be put in a way that, hey, here's an
It's
area that you can improve
constructive.
on.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what we can do to help you get there. Is this something that's interesting to you that you want to work on? And that kind of drives me as well. Like I welcome it. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that I think in the past, or when I wasn't as mature when it came to hearing critical feedback, I take it personally and be like, well, I don't agree with you.
Oh, that's something
or
I've
like,
had
that's
to
just your
work
opinion.
on. I used to be very, 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 very defensive. And that is absolutely something that I've had to work on over the years.
I'm gonna say just one more thing to that. It's like telling someone, "Oh, you snore," and then you saying, "No, I don't." It's like, how would you know? You're sound asleep, man. Uh, so I'm impressed that I haven't made any movie references or cliches, but that's as close as I'm gonna get.
Yeah, for me, I like a huge transformation for me came with starting my own business, getting introduced to Daniela, my producer of the podcast, and she had recommended this this it was like an all-day conference, Fearless. Is that what it was called? This was all the way back in 2019. This was the before times. I think it was called Fearless, but it was this all like female conference, and there was a workshop that I took during this, and it was a journal writing workshop with this woman, Hava Rose. And so that was kind of like my first experience with journal writing. And so starting to attend her workshops, which was really helpful to get through like the early days of 2020, and doing the online Zoom journal writing workshops, that hearing the way others spoke was unlike anyone ever talked in my circle of friends, or working in the beer world. That I feel like that was kind of like the beginning to prepare me for working with like this generation. That specifically something like when do you feel seen? And I'm like, I have no idea what that means. Like I didn't really understand that until understanding the concept. And so honestly, a lot of the clips that are coming out of for the season 3 of the podcast, like a lot of what my students are saying, I'm like, oh man, I totally feel seen right now, and I understand what that means. So it's just yet another example of how something needed to come before something else in order for me to like kind of fully grasp these concepts and move forward. And just kind of grateful for the journey thus far, and looking forward to continuing on the journey within academia.
Yeah, I mean, you and I have talked for a few years now, and to see you find this new path has been incredible. Like outside looking in to you, and I think even just your smile through the phone, I could hear it now talking about your students, and it's a different kind of smile than when we talk about business, right? So I think that the rewards there are definitely much more palpable when we speak.
And I always be around as MG, the venue specialist, to help clients, but just time to focus my energy on the next generation. Well, James, this has been such a treat, such a wonderful conversation. Really glad that I paired you with Sierra and Celia. Thank you both to Sierra and Celia for their recordings. Also want to thank listeners for joining us today. Follow Beyond the Venue podcast on Instagram, and check us out on all of your favorite podcast streaming platforms. Thanks again, James, and have a great day.
This is a Bivesta production.